Hey everybody, Wild Man Z here with an awesome comic book review, and I do mean awesome. If you're younger or you maybe just want to get into comics because you've seen some Marvel movies or DC movies and you're curious how to get into it, I recommend, for Marvel Comics at least, the Epic Comic Lineage. DC has something recent that's just come out. I think it's called DC's Finest, but comic book companies, Marvel leading the way, have gotten smart over the last few years. They realize that, like, first place, they have a lot of older fans. Also, they have young fans who are coming in from maybe watching movies, video games, things like that. And, I'll just be real. I think the new comics aren't so hot. So they realize they have, both Marvel and DC have treasure troves of old school comics. So for quite some time now, Marvel's been reprinting in various motifs. These are called epics. They're soft bound. About $40, $50 a pop. You get maybe about 20 issues per one. These kind of come out with, like, they go by what's called arcs or runs. I don't really know the delineation, but basically they'll take like a certain sequence of comics that have stories, usually in sequence, to tie together. But if, like, the character shows up in some other book in that time frame and the story relates, they'll pull that in. Or maybe it's an annual or some sort of a spotlight type of book that has them from that time period. They'll put it in. So they kind of try to make it like a continuous set of stories that tie together roughly. So what these are for, that's the epics. There's also something a little older called the Masterworks that Marvel puts out that would run sequentially from beginning to end. I like them. I used to collect them. They're hardcover, although they did come out with some soft covers of them as well. Then there's a bigger, more expensive, definitely very stately and attractive, called omnibuses. They're hardcover, and I have a bunch of them as well. They're beautiful. They're about 100 and change for them. They're costly, but they have there's about 600 pages on average. Again, hardcover, really nicely done. The problem with them, because they're really thick and bulky, they're like a dictionary, is they're kind of, you can't like take them on the bus or train or things like that. They're hard to just put into a bag and carry around if you want to read like in the park or something. They're definitely like cumbersome. So it's something you have at home if you have like you have a heavy wood table here, like, 'cause you really need to put it on something. It'll get heavy on your lap if you're older. It's something nice to have if you have on a bookshelf and you want to pull out once in a while, read. But these are good carry around things. If you want to read outside or, take it on the, take it in your car down to the beach and sit on a bench. The Masterworks are good. And, the Epics are good. And DC has something very recent that's come out called DC's Finest, which are similar. I'm not sure if they go in a chronological order or how they go, but I've just recently heard about them in the last couple of weeks. So, but if you want to get into comics, for example, if you watch the X-Men movies, made Wolverine movies, and you don't know where to begin with the comics, get yourself Epic #1, because this actually collects, by coincidence, because they don't always start with #1. Volume 1 is Wolverine 1 through 16, which came out in '88. And then Marvel Comics Presents 1 to 10. Marvel Comics Presents was kind of like they would take lesser known characters or new characters or characters who are on a team and kind of give them a little spotlight, if you will. And then Marvel Age Annual #4. That was something that periodically come out, like kind of like a special edition with a little extravaganza about a character or characters. What's going on here? This is street level action in a place called Madripoor. It's sort of a made-up equivalent of roughly Singapore or maybe like Hong Kong type of thing. Here's a nice picture of it on the opening page. It has a lovely, very expensive town like most of Singapore, but then it has like the shanty towns on the outside where a lot of crime and poor people. There's crime and poor people. And then maybe a vampire shows up there hiding in the shadows. Maybe some runaway villain is setting up shop there to do some nefarious deed that he's planning on maybe Japan or somewhere like that. Wolverine's had long tie-ins with Asia. We see this in the X-Men. We didn't know at the time that he's like 100, 200, 150, 200 years old. We didn't know that. We knew that he'd been around because, like, anytime they'd go somewhere, like they went to Japan, they had a connection with Japan early on because they had a Japanese member named Sunfire. And they early on went to Japan. I think they thought it was like one of the few black villains in Marvel Comics. I think his name was Moses Magnum, and I think he had an early adventure in Japan. I think Sunfire gets him. He left the team like second, third issue of the new X-Men, but I think he was set in Japan. He was setting off earthquakes or something like that. He was like a black super genius, evil guy. I thought that was always interesting. Comics, they had black heroes, but they didn't want to draw a black villain. Like they were like, oh, we don't want to act like we're making black people look bad back in the day. But kind of like, I was like, get everybody in there. It's like, I love villains. It's like, it kind of like felt like they were making people miss out on the fun. But at any rate, who does this comic book? This is done by kind of a dream team. And Chris Claremont's on here as a writer. Peter David, who you associate, if you're not in comics, Peter David was a long-time writer of the Hulk, and I think he wrote and drew it. Really good. I'm not a Hulk reader, but like he's considered like to be one of the best creators of Hulk. And then the art's mostly by John Buscema. Definitely the cover is it's a redone cover, but Buscema has a style. It's uncanny. It's definitely Buscema's art. He's fighting some guy with looks like razor blades for hands type of thing. Classic artist. I mean, Buscema is known for Avengers back in the 60s, early 70s. He's known for, big time Conan the Barbarian. He did a whole long run on there with Roy Thomas. Fantastic art. I really like his style. It's the Marvel way. It's, it's fun comic book style art. Just check it out. Some vampire getting punched in the face here. This guy right here, his name is Roughhouse. He's on the cover too. Roughhouse is I think he's an Asgardian. He's super strong. And as the name implies, he's just like a thug. He's not really smart. He just likes to fight a lot. He wants a little gold, maybe a little loot, get some beards going. He likes girls. But he doesn't have a really big agenda. As a matter of fact, later on he teams up with Wolverine in some of the issues John Byrne drew. We got a little bit of Jessica Drew showing up in here. That's Jessica Drew. She shows up in this Spider-Woman. Shows up in Madripoor. And they call him... Oh, actually, that I am wrong about that because we have several characters showing up. That is actually Karma from the New Mutants. Jessica Drew does show up. It's Karma. Yep. He pulls her into the shadows. Yep. That's she shows up as well. They both are brunettes. Karma is clearly Asian now. But at any rate, Jessica Drew shows up. Karma. They always have a lot of female characters that always tend to team up with Wolverine. I know, he used to team up. She doesn't show up in these issues, but Carol Danvers will show up a lot in Wolverine's books or in the Avengers. The X-Men. They bring the Grey Hulk in here for some. He drags him into some more of a goofy issue here. The show Hulk getting shot in the face and doesn't do anything. Yeah, a lot of goofy fun here. It's Buscema's great at drawing bad guys. It's he's got his claws just holding this guy's nostrils up, and Wolverine doesn't slice and dice guys who are just normal dudes. Usually, just beats them down really good. But he's just got this guy on the spot. Hulk as a Gray Hulk was he certainly was no Bruce Banner intelligent wise, but he was kind of like he was kind of like a gangster. Like he would talk kind of like James Cagney, as when he was Gray Hulk. So I'm not a big Hulk reader, but there's a lot of gags in this one with the Hulk. Like Wolverine he shows up in Madripoor and he buys him a whole bunch of purple pants. He's not wearing purple pants as the Gray Hulk, and he's like, what the hell? And it's kind of like a lot of goofy fun. But I used to like the comics back in the day because they would have serious issues, but then they would have the goofy issues, and I like both of them. We got my man Sabretooth showing up here. If you haven't read the comics, but you've seen the movies, you certainly know his arch enemy is Sabretooth. That's like his foil. Similar power set, arguably more powerful, stronger, bigger, just as fast, same senses. Doesn't have an adamantium skeleton, I don't believe. At least in the old days he didn't, but he didn't need it. He was plenty tough. He had natural claws. They were plenty tough. There's some really good issues in here. This is really cool if you want to get into Wolverine. If you've seen the movies, you wonder how he was portrayed in the comics. This is definitely a good portrayal of him. You'll get a lot of his classic enemies. Here he's fighting these panels here, the Silver Samurai. The X-Men had gone to Japan a couple times in the X-Men 100s range, and Wolverine falls in love with a Japanese girl named Mariko. She's comes from an honorary family in Japan, and she has a family member. I forgot if it's a father or uncle who's the Silver Samurai, who's sort of like, I don't know what it would be called, but sort of the protector of the family. He carries the family traditional sword, and it's powered up. It's got some kind of mystical power to it. He's not just an ordinary samurai, and he goes at it all the time with Wolverine. They kind of go back and forth like in the movie. I would say the Silver Samurai is not evil. He's just kind of like, he's got an agenda. And him and Wolverine always end up going at it. Nobody really ever gets killed. They just kind of tussle real hard. Wolverine would show up in Madripoor, and he would typically, I try to find a picture here, when he goes around a lot of people, he puts on an eye patch. Wears an eye patch, and he would call himself Patch. That was supposed to be like his disguise. Why is he going there? Well, at this time period, 88, 89, the X-Men had, typically they're centered in upstate New York, and so Westchester County, Gray Malkin Lane, which actually is a real road. I looked it up. It's like a little, this is a lot of these things that are based on Long Island or New York City or Westchester, based on real places. And there is a Gray Malkin Lane in, can't remember the name of the town, but it's in Westchester, and you can Google it. And they had been in some battle, and they were supposed to be killed, but this goddess came, basically. He opened up this thing called the Siege Perilous, which allowed them an avenue of escape. They had to start their lives over. They wound up in the Australian outback, desolate town. It was abandoned. It was like an old gold mining town or something like that. It was kind of like the Wild West, but in Australia. I've never been to Australia, but it kind of reminded me of the Wild West. And there was nobody around. Of course, villains do show up, like the Reavers and so forth. But there was an Aboriginal man. I think his name was Gateway, he never said anything. Why they called him Gateway, I don't know. But he would just sit on top of, maybe they just made the name up, because he would sit on top of a hill outside of town. And when they encountered him, they realized this guy could twirl it looked like a bolo. I'm not sure what the name of it is, but it's like a twirly rock thing. And he could open up a portal, and he would know where you wanted to go. So usually the person who would show up there would be Wolverine, and he would want to show up to Madripoor to take care of some business on a little break, basically. Say, I'll be back in a couple days. Sometimes in those runs of X-Men, maybe there'd be an issue where Wolverine wasn't there. It was kind of like they were kind of a weaker team at the time. Cyclops was not on it. Jean wasn't on it. There's a lot of inexperienced characters. You had Colossus and Nightcrawler, who were never team leader guys. And then Wolverine was Pharaoh. The team was run by Storm. I believe in that she had just gotten her powers back just recently. She was depowered for a couple of years. And then you had a bunch of newbies on there. You had Psylocke, who she was a weaker psychic character at the time. She develops further on, later on, through more powers, and becomes a different person, basically. And then Dazzler, who is powerful, but wasn't really using it that good. And then this guy Longshot, who was from the Mojoverse. He wasn't a mutant. He was just kind of like an alien, really. Who was kind of a wispy guy, and a guy had luck as he's kind of like Domino. He kind of had luck as a power. But they didn't really play it up too much. He never did anything that lucky. He just kind of dodge a bullet type of thing. But a lot of newer characters who were kind of they didn't have good leadership ability, and they didn't have their Xavier wasn't there, Psyche wasn't there, and they were kind of scattered to the wind, if you will. And so when Wolverine would leave, they would really be in some dire straits. And so it was kind of kept the tension on the story. They had some really good arcs in that time period. This is they ran into the Reavers, and who were a bunch of characters that Wolverine had crippled in the Hellfire Club saga. They were like mercs, and they got put back together cybernetically by Donald Pierce. Maybe Lady Deathstrike in there. And they obviously hated Wolverine. And so they show up there. And some other Donald Pierce shows up there, Lady Deathstrike, and a whole bunch of other nefarious characters. But those were really fun stories. That went on for a couple years. So, the comics used to be really, really fun back in the day. And I really wish, it's not me, because when I read these issues, I still think they're really fun. It's I'll pick it up. When I get the epics, there's sometimes comics in there I never read. And I'm like, wow, that's a great picture of Silver Samurai. Check this out. That's doing it the Marvel way right there. So that's kind of art I like in comics. Really cool comic book art. Inking looks good. The color is nice, and the reproduction here is really good too. You know, I got to give the team that whoever does the reproduction does a really good job. So, at any rate, I still think these comics, including new stories I read from back in the old days that I'd never read, I really like it. And sometimes I pick up comics that I've never read, like lines like I've never read Cloak and Dagger or Power Pack, or I've read a little bit of Rom, but not much. I'm getting into Micronauts, which I read a few issues of back in the day, and they're really good, by Mike Golden. You know, really good stories. I think Bill Mantlo and Mike Golden is the artist, and they're really good. I got a masterwork of that, which I'll show. But when I pick up some newer comics, which I go once in a while, sometimes I look at the art, and the art's groovy, but then I start reading a story, and I don't know what it is, but it's a modern sensibility, I guess, because it's just people are different. And, you know, you age at a certain point in life and you realize that, you know, you're kind of like on the leaving end of things, and it's like, you know, times are changing. But I guess what I don't like about them is they're usually very, like, there's a lot of scenes of just characters like eating and like drinking coffee and like having boring conversations. Like these guys would have a battle plan, or there'd be pirates at the table, or like there'd be some guy in the corner, and everybody's so afraid of doing anything kind of stereotype. So like if a beautiful woman walks by, everybody's just sitting there kind of acting like can't say anything to her, you know. It's just a very like, the male characters, in my opinion, just don't act very masculine, and the women, they're just afraid of them making them beautiful, and there's no seduction, there's no romance. It's just, I don't know. I just read them, and it's really flat. And it's, you know, I like, you know, I'm a guy into working out and stuff, so I like when I look at these pictures in here, you know, just look at the cover. I mean, you got a big lumen guy over a guy with claws. It's like really, you know, it's action-packed kind of macho stuff. And here's a great story. It was in the, somewhere, it's Wolverine number 9. I did not read this back in the day. The story starts out with these, let's find the early pages here. There's these guys, right? They're clear. This is Gene Colan's art. It's really dark and moody. They're clearly in shadow, and they come to this inn out in the middle of nowhere. I'm not sure if it's Canada, wherever it is, but it's remote. And they kind of put pressure on the innkeeper, like, we want a room, like, you know, get us a room. He's like, oh, okay, I'll clean one up in a second for you. He's reading a Playboy. You know, they couldn't do that these days. So, clearly these guys are on the run. You know, they get in the room. They're a nervous wreck. You know, they're like looking around. The guy's looking. He's looking in the corners, and then like suddenly a hand comes right through the wall. It's Wolverine's claws, right? And you're just like, holy crap! And he just takes that dude and drags him out, and he comes right through the wall basically, and drags him out and kills him outside. You know, they find a body right out in the snow, whatever. Right? They show the claws, so you know it's Wolverine now. So we're not realizing why he could take these dudes out. They're mercs, but they're just regular people, you know, with guns and knives, you know, limited skill set. And he's just unnerving them. He's picking them off one by one, you know. And the head guy is like, he's just losing his marbles, the head guy. They imply this guy's the leader. I don't know if they ever give him a name, you know. They're just kind of like, he's implied to be the leader, and he's just laughing. He's like, you guys think you're going to get away from this dude? He's like, we're dead. He's like, he's laughing. Like, you know, he's like kind of out of his rocker. We get the idea that these guys were mercs in the Middle East back in the day. Undisclosed time. This is when, after we had, the Iran incident and so forth. So it was probably implied to be Iran or somewhere. And they had taken over a monastery. They were paid off by some foreign government to do something or other, ransom the United States or something like that. They took over a monastery, and like they did terrible things to nuns, which, I mean, obviously these guys you're wanting to see these guys get killed. I was reading this, I said, well, I'm surprised I didn't read this back in the day. I just missed this issue. They would take the nuns outside and like do mock executions. Like they may shoot somebody, but then have like only one bullet in the gun, and they would act like they're going to shoot you, and it'd be blank. And they would torment you basically. So they're going through the woods. He's picking them off one by one. They find some poor guy in the woods with a boat, and they take it from him. They just leave him hanging in the woods. They take his boat, and they're like, yeah, we're getting away now. We're going down the river in a canoe. And nope. Wolverine does a classic, kind of like Jason did in that one movie. Just comes out of the freaking water and grabs one of them. You know, he's just like goner. And they just saw like some blood in the water type thing, you know. So, you know, he's a goner. So it gets down to like the last dude and him. the leader, of course. And I'm reading this, I'm like, Wolverine's like taking his time with these guys, and so the bad guy goes to him. There, the guy's got a gun, but like Wolverine's Wolverine, he knows that, and he goes, the bad guy goes to him. There were Canadians in the embassy, and he goes, yep, including a Canadian nun. And the guy goes, and then Wolverine goes, yeah, marched her out every day, pretending to kill her. Not yet, you'd say, and then you'd use her. When I found her, she was dying. She caught a bullet in the crossfire. One civilian casualty, what the military calls acceptable losses, and they put it in quotes. Before she died, though, she told me what you'd done to her. And this woman, whose life was built on love and forgiveness, she said, promise me you'll make them suffer like I suffered. And the last thing she heard before she died were the words, I promise. The guy says back to him, but I didn't kill her. And Wolverine says, you did worse. You did more. You destroyed her spirit, her soul, till it was to the point where there was no forgiveness left in her for you. And he goes, and there's certainly none from me. And so they come to a tense moment. The guy pulls the gun. Wolverine's standing there. But instead of, spoiler alert, instead of shooting Wolverine, he shoots himself in the head and falls into the river. Because he knew he couldn't have a chance. But he wasn't going to give Wolverine the pleasure of killing him. He killed himself instead. But it was rough. I read that. I said, boy, that was a hell of a thing. This was back in the 80s. It was, comics had a little darkness in there because you had Frank Miller in there. He did Daredevil and Batman, and they were dark. We're getting into some, after the Dark Phoenix saga, comics kind of in the mid to late 80s kind of took in Marvel and DC, both took a little darker turn, but they were well written. They weren't, it wasn't too much. It was just a different beat than I remember reading in the 80s. It was very sunny and bright, but towards the late 80s, it got a little bit of a darker mode. I enjoyed both of it. I thought, Claremont's writing and Frank Miller, all those guys, they were just, a lot of Alan Moore got in there, a lot of talent, a lot of guys who just are forgotten, like David Michelin and Jim Shooter. I liked all the stories pretty much. Sometimes, like I said, I pick up new, get a run on eBay, or I'll buy the masterwork of Moon Knight, or something I didn't read a lot of, or Power Pack, and I like them all. It's like different extents. Here's a homage to, I guess it's X-Men 131, 132 in there, where Wolverine's fighting Hellfire Club, and he gets knocked into the sewer by one guy. He gets driven through the floors of a multi-story nightclub, and ends up in the sewers. They assume he's dead. Last panel, he does a classic. I guess this was around the time of the Terminator. I don't know which one came in first, but he grabs a pipe over his head in the rushing sewage. There was like a rainstorm. It's a storm sewer, and there's just water rushing past him, dirty water. And he pulls himself up and basically does an "I'll be back" type of thing. And it was, read this as a kid, was just really raw. I like the art here. I mean, just the physiques and the way they're drawn, just the visceral type of bodies. You can tell this guy's angry and he's knocking on a door type of thing. And he always teams up with guys who are like Arch. His name's Archie. It's applies a pilot, kind of a tougher guy. He's been through some wars. He can use a gun, can use his fists, can fly a plane, helicopter. Maybe gets captured and tortured once in a while. Wolverine then has to kill a few fools. And a lot of it's kind of stereotype, but it's just fun and really good stories. So we got a little bit of... looks like we have a little Jessica Drew action in here. I'm not sure. I have to reread this, what's going on with Archie and the horse here, but something's going on. Really, really great drawing now. I read this quickly when I got it. Some of these stories I did not read back in the day. It looks like we're getting into the Marvel premiere, whatever it is, back then. But here's some more John Buscema art. It's really cool. I like a lot of the lounge scenes, the bar scenes. They're awesome. They showed characters smoking back then. I don't think they showed it anymore. I don't smoke, but certainly doesn't bother me when I see it. It never made me want to smoke when I was a kid, seeing characters smoking in a bar. It's that's what people did back in the day. And a lot of beautiful women. Very, very, everything was very masculine, very feminine. It was just, I like the way that they would accentuate the bodies and the all that. So anyway, rambling on here. If you want to pick up, here's just a great fight scene. If you want to pick up comics if you want to get into Wolverine as you've never really read it before, or you've maybe read it casually but never read a real good run of it, this is excellent. Wolverine Epic Collection, Volume 1, Madripoor Nights. I'm sure you can get an Amazon new copy, and I'm sure you can find used copies. I pick up used copies of these things all the time on like eBay or thrift books. I have like a wish list there. They notify me every once in a while with either a comic book or sometimes a literary book or sometimes a bodybuilding book, like an old school bodybuilding book. Just recently they came out with Lee Haney's workout book. So, for those of you, if anybody's watching this who watches my workout ones, my bodybuilding, old school bodybuilding ones, maybe I'll review that book. I might buy it. It's on my wish list right now. And yeah, I love Lee Haney. I've seen him on stage. But anyway, this is a cool, awesome comic book, awesome series. Check it out. Wolverine, old school, late 80s. It's a lot of fun. On that note, Wild Man Z out. Take care.